Now I'm going to go ahead and show you how to can and process your pears so that you can use them throughout the year. What I just harvested was maybe a quarter of the tree of one of our 4 trees. So I went ahead and weighed it out, and what I ended up with was 120 pounds of pears. So I'm going to go ahead and cook a lot of this down into sauces because that's going to be able to condense it down so that I can save it in a lot less space. Now some of these I'm going to go ahead and slice and put in the freezer whole to make pies and stuff with later, and you can also do that if you want it. And oh, Cookie, quit trying to be in every single shot. You want to play with the pears? But you can, if you want, because it's kind of hot this time of year, and canning is a long cooking process, you can freeze these if you have a smaller amount and can them in the winter when it's cooler. But since I'm going to have hundreds and hundreds of pounds, I can't freeze all of that. I'm going to go ahead and just cook it now. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make, primarily there's 3 things I'm going to make out of the sauce of these pears, and I'll show you how to do each one. It may end up being a couple of different videos depending on how long it takes me to do it. But a very common use for pears that is very good is something called pear butter. If you've never tried pear butter, it's really, really good. It's basically pear sauce that is flavored and cooked down to a smooth, buttery consistency that you then can use to spread on toast or biscuits or on pork, chicken, meat as a glaze or anything like that. It's a sweet, fruity glaze. But it's really, really good on just like toast or whatever. So another thing we can make with this is pear sauce. Now pear sauce is basically the same thing as applesauce, only made with pears. And you can do it the way when you do your pear sauce, you can mix other fruits in it to give it flavors, or you can just do it as a basic pear sauce, and then later when you open your canning jars or take it out the freezer or however you choose to store it, you can then go ahead and add different flavors to it. You know, cherry is really good in pear sauce, and it gives you this kind of cherry flavored applesauce, but it's made with pears. Another use that I like to use my pears for is to make a base to make fruit leather. Things like mulberry, from the mulberry video, those that asked, or strawberry, or berries, things that don't have a whole lot of fiber, orange, lemon, stuff that has a strong taste but it doesn't have a lot of fiber or substance to it that you can turn into fruit leather. I like to make a pear sauce and use that as my base because it's sweet and it eliminates me from having to use any sugars or preservatives. And it's got enough of a texture to it that it'll dehydrate and make the leather, but it doesn't have a real strong predominant taste in and of itself, so then you can add things like strawberry or cherry or blackberry or whatever you want to it. Any juice that you really like you can add to it, and then go ahead and make your fruit leathers. So I'll show you how to do that as well. And Cookie is such a camera hog today. What's wrong with you? Alright, to go ahead and show you the difference when we pick these pears, and again these are Jerusalem pears, this is more of an eating pear. I could bite into this and eat it straight off like this, and straight off the tree, as opposed to your normally pear-shaped canning pears, but it's the same with both. They were very green, kind of more like this one, and after letting them sit for several days in the house, they're beginning to get a little bit softer and they're turning a bit more red. Now these Jerusalem pears will turn more red or brownish and yellowish than a typical pear, but your regular pears will do the same. They'll begin to kind of turn a slight color and they'll be a little bit softer to the touch, and that means that they're getting sweeter and softer, and it makes them a lot easier to can and to cook with. Pears will never reach their full sweetness on the tree. They must be picked or they must drop. Problem with letting them drop is that by the time you find them, they're usually full of ants or busted or whatever. So I like to wait till several of them are dropping and then go ahead and harvest. Let them sit for a couple of days in the house, protect it, and then you go ahead and can them. It makes them a lot better. Alright, since the base to both my pear butter and the fruit leather is going to be pear sauce, I'm going to start with showing you how to make the pear sauce. It's good to note that these pears will last quite a while in the house. They have been sitting, let's see, I picked them Thursday and today is Tuesday. So they've been sitting quite a while and they're still good. There's a few little bad spots that have started to turn that I may have to cut off, but for the most part, they're perfect. So they will sit for a while in the house, and these being basically eating pears that you can eat just like an apple, and they're so good. then you can keep a couple in the house just to snack on. Now, a couple different ways you can do this. If it's a large canning pear, you may want to go ahead and peel it, but since I'm making sauces, the way I do it, I don't have to peel them. Saves a lot of time when you're canning a couple 100 pounds of pears. So the way I'm going to do these is I'm just going to cut them into 4, just like I'm quartering an apple. And you'll notice that, here, let me get a little bit bigger one so you can see well. You'll notice that when I cut it in half, it resembles very much like an apple. Of course, your larger pears aren't going to be quite the same. But I typically just cut them into 4, just like I'm cutting an apple. And then I'll take it and I'll just slightly, because right in the middle where the seeds and stuff are, there's a little part that's tough. And so the stem, the seeds, and that little tough part right in the middle, I cut that out. The rest I just throw in the pot. And what I'm going to do is just cook all of this down together, and then I'm going to run it through a food processor or food mill or Ninja, whatever you have. And that's going to go ahead and chop it up so fine that it won't matter that the peelings are even in there, and you won't taste them in the end. If anything, it's going to give it just a slight more of a predominant pear flavor. But for me, it's so much easier than having to peel several hundred pears. So, see, this one's got a little bit of a spot that's starting to go bad, so I'm going to cut that spot off. And just continue to do this until I've filled my pot. The pear recipe that I'm going to use for the pear butter calls for about 2 quarts worth of processed pear, which is going to come out to about 6 pounds of pears. But since I have so much, I'm just going to fill my pot, cook it down, make the sauce, and then take 2 quarts out of that to continue on into my pear butter. And if you're looking for trees to grow, if you're in an area where these Jerusalem pears will grow, I highly recommend them because they're so good and so versatile. And they're just good straight off the tree or straight off the ground. If you were using the regular pear-shaped variety, canning pears, you would do it exactly the same. The only difference is that you would have to cook it a little bit longer because it would be a little bit harder of a pear. But everything else, all the ingredients, everything would be exactly the same. And I do have some of those pears. I will be canning some of those, but those these ripen before those do, and those will survive and last on the tree a little bit longer than these will. So to break up my workload, I'm canning these first because they're almost to the point of going bad. If you end up with way too many pears or jars of preserves or whatever it is that you're making, which I don't know how you could ever have too much fruit leather. I love fruit leather. For those who don't know what fruit leather is, it's basically a fruit roll-up. But because pear trees make so much, if you think they're going to go bad before you're going to have the opportunity to eat them, making these jarred preserves with a pretty little twine around them and a little sticker label makes for great, inexpensive Christmas presents. And even though they don't cost a whole lot, people tend to really appreciate them because they know that a lot of work goes into it, and it's something that they typically wouldn't spend the time doing on their own, so it's always appreciated. So if you've got abundant amounts of fruit available to you, making these jarred preserves makes great little inexpensive gifts. So that's my tip for the Depression Living video series. Anything homemade will save you money and be greatly appreciated when it comes time for Christmas. Now I've got all my pears cut. Well, not all of them, all of the ones on this batch. I'm going to be doing this all night. But for this batch, I've got my pot full of pears, and I'm going to just turn some heat on it. I'm going to put, for this pot, about 1.5 cups of water. If it was a smaller pot, maybe, 2/3 of a cup, or depending on the size of your pot. You don't want to add much moisture because all of the moisture has to cook out, or at least most of it. But we want to add just enough to where it doesn't stick at the bottom. So because I'm using a large pot, that will cover 2 burners, and I like to do that because it lets me put more heat on it, and it also provides more surface area for evaporation, so I find it helps me to do it quicker when I'm using a large pot like this. I'm going to go ahead and add some water to it, just so that I can keep it stirred and keep it from sticking. I'm going to put it on a nice high to medium high heat, and I'm going to stir it every once in a while. If it starts to stick, I'll add a little bit more water or whatever, but I'm only going to cook it for a little while, just enough to soften up the pears, and then I'm going to move them to a food processor to speed the process up. If you don't have a food processor, you can still do it completely and totally on stovetop. It's just going to take a lot more cooking time because you've got to cook it down to a sauce. You'll notice that I didn't fill my pot all the way to the very top. I left just a little bit, just to make it easier to stir so I don't go throwing half the stuff out the pot when I'm trying to stir it. If you fill it up to the top, it's going to make it very difficult to stir. You don't have to stir it constantly, but check it pretty regularly. If you want to speed the process up, give them a good stir. Cover it with the lid. That'll help to hold the heat in. Just remember to come and open it every few minutes and check it and stir it, make sure nothing's sticking. It really won't take very long for them to soften in here. I'd give it a good 10-15 minutes at the most, but it depends on what kind of pears you have, of course. If you're using canning pears, it's going to take quite a bit longer than with these pears. And it's going to depend also on how much you have in your pot and so forth, and the size of your pot. So that's going to vary, but just stir it until it gets kind of soft, and then soft enough to where you think it's going to cut well and easily in your processor. But I'll show you what it'll look like. I think it's been cooking probably long enough. As I said, it doesn't really have to cook all that long. Go ahead and move this, take this lid off. As you can probably see, I'm going to kill the fire too so I don't catch myself on fire. With these particular pears, and as with most food, when you cook it, the red colors tend to come out. So all of the green peelings are now turning kind of a brownish, yellowish red. It actually looks like a big pot full of red potatoes now. And it's kind of got the texture of red potatoes that are starting to cook apart. I can break them up with the spoon. So I'm going to speed this process along. I'm going to put it in this blender. I'm using a Ninja, but of course you can use any food processor that you have available. And again, you don't have to do this with a food processor. You can do it all by cooking it down, but it's just going to take quite a bit longer. Now, you can also do this with a pressure cooker, and it will cut down your cook time. You can also do it slower, say overnight, with a crock pot. But I like to do my demonstrations with the simplest tools possible, things that most everybody has, because even though I do have a pressure cooker, I know that not everybody does. So I'll show you how to do this regularly on the stove top, and then for the other 100 pounds that I gotta do, I'll do it in the pressure cooker to speed it up for myself. So if you do a lot of canning, I do recommend that you get a canning pot or a pressure cooker. Alright, let me not overload the top on this thing. Okay, since I'm going to have much more than I need for my pear butter recipe, I'm going to go ahead and add some to a separate pot that I'm going to cook down for my pear sauce. Now, for the pear butter, the recipe calls for 2 quarts. So once I get all of this puree down, I'm only going to use 2 quarts of puree, which comes out to 64 ounces. So since I have ounce measurements on here, I'm going to go ahead and use my last bit to measure out 64 ounces. And I'll go ahead and kind of show you. This already looks pretty much like applesauce now. but I'm going to cook it down to reduce the amount of liquid that's in it. Alright, remembering that I got to measure out 64 ounces in here. My puree right now is at a little 49, so what I'm going to do, removing this blade, which is hot. I'm going to go ahead and add some back, just to get my measurements right. A little bit more. Perfect. Alright, so now I have exactly 2 quarts. So I'm going to add that back to my long pot. And the reason I'm using my long pot for the pear butter and the smaller pot for the pear sauce is because the pear butter has to cook down a lot thicker than the pear sauce does. And as I mentioned before, with this pot having more of a surface area, it'll help it to reduce. If you want to make more than one serving of this, one batch is certain servings, I recommend you do it in multiple pots, because if you try to double or triple the recipe, it tends to not reduce properly and it won't get as thick as you like it to, and it doesn't quite turn out the same. So do your 2 quart measurement and that's it. So now that this is back on, this is going to be my pear butter and this is just going to be regular pear sauce. So what I'm going to do now, turning the heat back on so that it can start reducing. I recommend that you keep all children and pets out of the kitchen, because this has got to cook down really thick and it will start to pop, and it will pretty much be like edible napalm. So if it pops and sticks to you, it's going to burn you. So keep the kids and animals away from the stove. I like to put a lid on it, but since it's got to evaporate, you can't seal it in, so I'll put a lid kind of sideways so the steam can still escape, but it minimizes some of that splashing. So first thing first, this recipe calls for 2 cups of sugar, white sugar. I like to use an organic raw sugar, so there's actually a little bit of brown sugar in here, but it still works the same. It gives it a wonderful taste. I really love it. If I have to use sugar, this is the sugar I'm going to use. It's organic raw cane sugar. Stirring in my 2 cups of sugar. Doing the same for my pear sauce. Basically right now these are both pear sauces because they're exactly the same. Okay. Folding some of this sugar into the pear sauce. And for those who want a less amount of sugar in your cooking, this really doesn't have a lot of sugar compared to most preserves or jellies or spreads or glazes, because the pear acts as mostly as your sweetener, but there is this little bit of sugar in there. Now, if you want to cut back on the sugar, if you freeze it and put it in the freezer, you can cut back on the sugar. But if you are canning this, do not cut back on the sugar. Remember that your sugar is part of your preservant. And if you don't have a high enough pH level when you are canning, you will get botulism in your jars and you will die. So you have to have the sugar when you're canning, because it's what's preserving and keeping bacteria from growing in your food. Okay, at this point I'm going to use some pumpkin spice. If you don't like pumpkin spice, you can use just nutmeg. But I find the cinnamon and the mixture of the pumpkin spice works really well in this. It tastes so great. I'm going to put about about a half a teaspoon, 2/3 of a teaspoon amount in each. Stir it in. Oh my gosh, that is so good. Okay, at this point, you have pear sauce. It's got to cook down just a little bit to get a little bit thicker, but you put it in your jars. You can can it with a hot water bath, or you can let it cool, put it in bags or whatever, freeze it in the freezer. The pear sauce, you can add fruit to it if you wanted to. At this process, you could, or you could have put in the blender with it some cherries or whatever you want to flavor it. Or what I typically do, can it plain, and then when I take it out, if I want to can it, put flavors in it in smaller portions, I would do that too. You can also flavor it by putting fruit juice in it and then cooking it down again. As it stands right now, this would be really good in some little pies. When I make my pear pies, I use pear slices, but I also put some of the pear sauce in it. It's so good. Now, for this to become pear butter from pear sauce, we have to let it cook quite a bit, and we have to add 1/4 of a cup of orange juice. Okay, put 1/4 of a cup of orange juice. About a teaspoon lemon juice, and either a teaspoon's worth of orange zest, or about 1/4 of a teaspoon's worth of orange extract. Stir it up. Such a wonderful smell. Oh, let's make sure how it smells amazing. Stir that up. High heat, let it cook. Once it starts popping a whole lot, turn your heat down. Stir it regularly just to keep it from popping all that much. I'm going to leave the lids off of it for just a little while so that it can evaporate quickly. And when it starts to get very violent and messy, I'm going to put my lids on about halfway so that the steam can still escape, but it catches some of that napalm that's flying out of there. Man, that stuff makes a mess. Alright, it's thickened up quite a bit. Try not to get too close because it's really starting to pop now. I've reduced my heat down to medium to low medium because it's starting to pop a lot. I'm going to go ahead and put my lid on where the steam can still escape, but where it won't splash me so much when I'm working it in the pot. Okay. So this one is thickened up quite a bit. It's popping a lot. I'm going to turn that one down. Go ahead and put that lid a little bit. Let it cook down a little bit more, and then I'm going to come back again and check it. Okay, the pear sauce is good. That doesn't have to cook down quite as thick. Once it looks about like applesauce, a little bit darker, but about the texture, then you're good. Now, of course, had I peeled this, it would have been a much lighter color, but I like the contrast in color, so it doesn't bother me any. Now, the pear butter, on the other hand, that's got to get a little bit thicker. So at this point, it's thick enough, and I've got it down to a low heat, that when I stir it, it doesn't fully spread back out. If you could see that from there, how the edges kind of just slowly move back out. See how it's got to creep back to where it was? It's not just pouring back out. It's almost right. When it gets to this point, you need to keep stirring it. And what I do is I'll push it down the middle. And when it gets to the point to where it stays separated, then it's done. Because you want it to be where the liquid is not separating from the pulp anymore. So if I do like this and there's still liquid running down, even though it's staying with kind of a gap, it's almost there, not quite. There's still liquid running out. So I'm gonna keep stirring, but it won't be long. Almost ready. The stirring is gonna keep it from sticking or burning, but at this point it's also gonna help it to finish cooking a little quicker because you're releasing that steam and letting it evaporate. Remember to rinse your jars in really hot water. So it's thickened up enough now to put in the jars. Always wash your jars first in really hot water. This is going to serve for two purposes. For one, it's going to sterilize your jars and make sure that they're sanitary, but it's also going to prevent the jar from being shocked by the hot contents and shattering in your hand. So I'm going to go ahead and fill this up, leaving a small gap at the top. And as you can see, this is a great way to use pears when you have a lot, because it really reduces it down quite a bit. Now granted, I still have a lot more to can, so this is just one batch. So you want to make sure that your lids are on nice and tight, that the jar's really hot. We put the lid on nice and tight, and then we're going to seal this with a hot water bath. And I'll show you, I've done this in previous videos, but I'll go ahead and make a specific video just on how to seal jars with a hot water bath so that you can see the proper way to do it so that this doesn't spoil on you. So as you can see, I've made quite a bit off of that little batch, and I have quite a bit more to make. So I'm going to get back to cooking, but this is a very simple recipe that you can use your pears on. That's very good, and it will last a very long time. I'm going to use most of the pear sauce that I made to make my fruit leathers, and I'll show you how to do that in the next video. And to see how to properly seal these jars, go ahead and revert back to the video on vacuum packing without a vacuum packer. It will be the video on hot water baths for mason jars. So I will try to get the hot water bath video up before I put this one up so that you will already know what to do. And there you have it. These will make nice little Christmas gifts, and they will make nice little meals throughout the year until next year when I have an overabundance of pears and I do it all over again. And some of these I'm going to go ahead and just slice and cook it. Really. Now I have to re-sanitize everything, cookie. I'm going to show you how to do that, and also pear sauce, which is the same thing as pear. Here, let me get a little bit bigger one so you can see well. Cookie, get down.